The chapter opens with speaking about your free time, with, well, first with actually getting someone's attention and with telling time. Senti scusa, the informal, senta scusi, the formal. And then, of course, telling time, che ora è and che ore sono. Sorry. So there's time. Yes. So with telling time, che ora è and che ore sono, there's no difference between those two questions. Time can be singular as in midday, midnight, mezzogiorno, mezzanotte, and as in 1 o'clock, luna. And then, of course, from 2 to 11, it's plural. So that's what you can ask in the singular or in the plural. Che ora è? Che ore sono? Doesn't matter. You can use either. To express time, you use just the verb e and nothing else with mezzogiorno, with midday. I should actually. E mezzogiorno or e mezzanotte. Then if it's 1 o'clock, you use e and then the article e luna. And with the rest of the hours from 2 to 11, you use sono le. Sono le due, etc. To express the hours. To express the minutes, the easiest thing to do it is just to use the conjunction e and then the number of the minutes, using the numbers from 1 to 59. So, for example, 5, 10, 15, and so on. So you'll want to review the numbers from 1 to 16. And when the minutes are 0, of course, you can say in punto, but it's not necessarily in punto. So with the minutes from 01 to 59, you can just say e 5 e 10 and so on. That's the easiest way to do it. For your purposes, if I were taking the test in this section, that's how I would express it. E with mezzogiorno, e with mezzanotte, e with article l'apostrophe, e luna, or sono le, the rest of the time for the hours. And then for the minutes, as I said, you can say in punto if it's right on the dot, or otherwise you can say e and then the number for the minutes. That's the easiest way to do it. As you saw in the textbook, of course, in colloquial Italian, you can do other things. For example, you can express 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and then from 40 to 59 minutes. Let me show you that. So for 15 minutes, you can say e un quarto. E un quarto, not to be confused with quattro, the number 4, but and a quarter, so e un quarto. And then with 30, you can say e mezzo o mezza, so and a half, mezzo, or and a half hour, mezza, with hour being feminine and therefore mezza being feminine, even though hour stays implicit. So è un quarto, you can say sono le 2:15, the easiest way, or you can say sono le 2:15. You can say sono le 2:30 or mezza, no, there's no difference, you can use either. Or sono le 2:30. Now, starting with 40, you can subtract from the next hour, for example. So instead of saying, you can say è l'una:40, è l'una:40. That's the easiest way to express that time. But colloquially, you could also say, you go to the next hour and then you subtract the minutes. So you could say sono le 2. So you go to the next hour, not è l'una, but sono le 2, but you use meno. Sono le 2 meno 20. We kind of do that in English too, right? Or how would we say that can we subtract minutes from the next hour in English? I guess we can say 10 till 2 or something like that, right? So somewhat similar. But again, I said if I were you, I would just do it the easy way and do e plus the number of minutes. But I still have to show you this because it's in the textbook. So you can say l'una meno 20, meno 19, meno 18, and so on. And when you get to this time, when you get to 45, you can say l'una:45, the easy way. Or you can say sono, go to the next hour again, sono le 2 meno un quarto. So with 15, we said è un quarto and a quarter. But when it's 45, you say meno un quarto. Again, at your level, the easy way is perfectly fine. If you are an overachiever, then you can go on and using è un quarto, e mezzo, meno 20, etc., meno un quarto. Is that somewhat clear? Now, with expressions for time, un attimo, un secondo, un minuto, un'ora, un giorno, una settimana, un mese, un anno. So just so you can hear the pronunciation of all those time units. For this activity, you were speaking about whether places were open or closed. And as you can see in Italian, and as you can see in these signs, as you can see in the train station, and as you can see, for example, at the movie theater, times are going to be given by the 24-hour clock. So le 12:15, le 15, le 19:15, le 23. In this case, you just say the numbers. You can't do a mezzo, you can't do meno un quarto, just say the numbers straight. And when you want to convert from the 24-hour time to the 12-hour time, which is what we use in everyday conversation, you just subtract 12 hours. Let's see. When you are using the 12-hour clock, as you would do in spoken Italian, if you want to, obviously from the context, it's going to be clear whether it's AM or PM. But if you want to make that explicit, you use the expressions di mattina, del pomeriggio, and di sera. Di mattina, you can use roughly from, let's say, 5 a.m. And this is just roughly, okay? 5 a.m. You would make the same distinction as we make in English. We can say 5 a.m. to, just to give you a rough guideline, 5 a.m. to 11:59 di mattina. For del pomeriggio, it gets trickier. You can say that from, well, mezzogiorno, obviously, so it would be from 12:01 until 3 or 4. And I put the question mark because there's really no neat break for when you start using del pomeriggio versus di sera. Because sera can start as early as 4 o'clock, but it varies a lot. It varies a lot regionally. For example, in the south, in central Italy and southern Italy, you can hear sometimes as early as 3 and 2 even. So there's no set time. But you use the sera until 11, okay? Or 11:59 if we want to be um, more precise. So again, from about 5 to 11:59 a.m. di mattina, from 12:01 until 3 or 4 del pomeriggio, then from about 4 to 11:59 di sera. And again, this is varies regionally. And then, of course, after midnight, you have obviously midnight, mezzanotte, but from 12:01 to, let's say, 4:59, you would say di notte. But again, also sometimes we say like it's 2 a.m., right? So depending on how you are thinking about time, you might switch di notte with di mattina. These are just rough guidelines. And there's a really good handout that I made for time if you want to go on the folder, on the Google Drive folder and find it. And there's lots of activities for that if you want to take a look at that. It really breaks it down for you. So that's time. And then the question, at what time? So the question here is, what time is it? Oops, shouldn't be highlighted. ¿Qué hora è and qué ore sono? ¿Qué hora è or qué ore sono? No difference again. Just to say what time is it. But the question, a qué hora, is at what time, as you can see from the preposition here, a qué hora, at what time. And as the ellipsis tells you, you're always going to have a different verb. At what time do you eat breakfast? At what time do you eat lunch? At what time? This is an incomplete question. It has to be completed by some kind of verb. So, a qué hora? The question is going to be answered with some form of the preposition a. So again, at what time, preposition a. Therefore, the answer is going to have also a. You can say a mezzogiorno or a mezzanotte. So with mezzogiorno and mezzanotte, with noon and midnight, you use a. A mezzogiorno, a mezzanotte. Then with one, you use all'apostrofo, all'una. So you use a with the article. Don't worry about what that is. Just learn it as sort of, this is how it's done. You learn that later on in the textbook. And then with 2 all the way until 11, you use alle, alle, due, alle tre, etc. You use alle. Okay? So with time, the question, che ora è? Che ore sono? What time is it? You answer with è mezzogiorno, è mezzanotte for noon and midnight, è, and then the article, el apostrofo, è l'una. And then from 2 to 11, you use sono le due, sono le tre, sono le quattro, and so on and so forth. For the minutes, if it's on the dot, in punto. And then for the minutes from 1 to 59, you can just use the conjunction e, and then the number for the minutes. E2, E3, E4, and so on. E58, E59. That's the easy way. Or as I said, you can use these expressions that are used in colloquial Italian. E un quarto for 15, e mezzo or mezza for 30. And then starting with 40 and moving forward, you can say the easy way, or you can express it by stating the next hour, sono le due, and then using the word meno, minus, meno 20, meno 19, and so on and so forth. Except for 45, you can say meno un quarto. And you could even say meno 45. Sono meno 15, sorry. Sono, although it sounds very strange to my ear. Sono le 2 meno 45. Oh, no, sorry, not 45, 15. 2 minus 15, right? If you want to make explicit in the context, obviously you don't know what time you're talking about, but to make explicit the time between the part of the day, you can say di mattina, roughly 5 to 11:59, del pomeriggio, 12:01 to 3 or 4, depending on when you are in Italy and depending also on the speaker. Di sera from about 4 to 11:59, and di notte from about 12:01 to 4:59. And again, di notte, di mattina, the same way we do in English, where we sometimes say one or the other, depending on our relationship to the time. Then we have the question a che ora, which begins with the preposition a, and therefore the answer is going to have some form of the preposition a. A che ora, at what time? Again, the ellipsis tells you that the question is to be completed with some kind of verb. The answer a mezzogiorno, a mezzanotte, at noon, at midnight, all'una, with the double L and apostrophe for 1 o'clock, and then alle due, alle tre, alle quattro, and so on from 2 to 11. Moving forward, I think those are the most important things for time. Oh no, the last thing from Strategie. Nel tempo libero, talking about your free time, nel tempo libero, in your free time, cosa ti, informal or le, formal, cosa ti piace fare? What do you like to do on your free time? The important thing about this question, well, first in the answer, obviously it's asking you what you like to do in your free time. So in this case, in the question, you have the verb fare to what you like to do. But in the answer, you can have any verb, which does not have to be fare. It can be really any verb. Mi piace ascoltare la musica. The most important thing about this structure is that the verb is not conjugated. So you keep the verb in the infinitive, the infinito. So we have mi piace plus the infinitive. Okay? And easy as that, mi piace, and then a verb in the infinitive that expresses a free time activity. And you can also use other verbs. Does it introduce preferire? Let's see. No, it doesn't. Okay, good. But you can use other verbs like to love, to like, to prefer, and so on and so forth. Let me change the page setup. So that's for strategie. Any questions before I move on to the first grammar point?
Could you just enlarge your screen a little bit?
Sure.
The document that you're working on?
Yes, thank you for saying that.
Thank you. That's
It's
much
okay.
better. Grazia.
Let's move on. So the first grammar point is, of course, vocabulary, because this chapter introduces conjugation to keep the material manageable. The verbs themselves are introduced as the vocabulary for this chapter. So you'll want to go to the vocabulary section in the back to make sure that you are um, familiar with all the verbs that are introduced here. And that's really, as you can see, that is the core of the vocabulary that's introduced in this chapter, except for these things that help to clarify the meaning of the verbs. So make sure you use this resource also for pronunciation. Again, you can never have enough pronunciation practice. And as you saw, probably this week's assignment include a significant amount of pronunciation review. So vocabulary, just be familiar with all the verbs introduced in the chapter, especially those that you would use to talk about what you do in a typical week, what you do in a typical weekend, what you do in your free time. Speaking of free time, make sure that you distinguish and you mirror the way a question is being asked. So if the question is, cosa the question, as we can saw, cosa ti piace fare? You would answer with mi piace plus a verb in infinitive. Mi piace ascoltare la musica. So you mirror the structure of the question. Cosa ti piace fare? Cosa ti piace fare? But the same question could be asked, cosa ti piace fare nel tempo libero? Obviously, you can put that at the beginning or at the end. Or you can ask, cosa fai nel tempo libero? Not what do you like to do, what do you do? I mean, obviously the meaning is more or less the same, it's just a different way to express it, but you mirror the structure in the sentence. As you can see, it's no longer piace plus an infinitive, it's a verb in the present tense, so your answer would also have to be with a verb in the present tense. So in this case, we have ascolto, ascolto la musica. Two ways of saying the same thing, but the structure is different. I think that answers one of the questions that someone asked. Why is it mi piace dormire instead of non dormo? With mi piace, you use a verb in the infinitive. Okay? So we took one of those questions out. Can move it up to the section where we discuss that. And we take out these. Okay, so pay attention also to the structure of the question. It'll tell you how your answer should be structured. If the question gives you the verb in the present tense, then your answer should be also in the present tense. If the question is asked with an expression that requires the infinitive, then then your answer would also be an expression that is accompanied by the infinitive, even if the meaning is more or less the same. And that takes us to, of course, the first grammar point, which is the present of verbs of the first conjugation, other verbs. So this is Struttura 3.1. You already saw that. So 3.1 is again the infinitive. I think here is where we have preferire, right? Let's see. Oh, no, they don't have preferire. They changed that? Yeah, I guess they changed that in this edition. So the only other expression that they introduced with infinitive is ti va di. Do you feel like? Ti va di, for example, ti va di andare al cinema? Do you feel like going to the movies? And then the answer would just be like sí or no. The mi va would just be, it's rare that it's expressed. It just remains implicit. So you would answer with sí, no, or some other expression that indicates that you agree or you disagree. So ti va di is also an expression that is followed by a verb in the infinitive. Ti va di plus infinito. Okay. And finally, we get to 3.2, the present of ARE verbs, the first conjugation. So in Italian, we have three conjugations, or that's a technical term that we use in Italian. So three different types of verbs. The conjugations are distinguished by the ending of the infinitive. So the first conjugation is verbs which end with are, and that's the largest one. Even new verbs that enter the Italian language, most of the time they are are verbs. The second conjugation is ere verbs, and the third conjugation is ire verbs. So we have are, ere, and ire. In this first conjugation, second conjugation, third conjugation. In this section, we cover the endings for the conjugation of ARE verbs. And the endings for ARE verbs are o, for io, I for tu, you, a for lei or lui, iamo for noi, we, lei and lui being, of course, she and he, ate for voi, you all, you plural, and ano for loro, they. So as you can see, there are 6 different endings, and that's why in Italian, you never really need the subject pronouns like we do in English. You really only need them for emphasis or when you need to avoid confusions, for example, with lui versus lei, to distinguish between she and he. So because you have 6 different verbal forms for each type of verb, you don't really need to use the pronouns. So in general, for your level, don't use them. And I'll be reminding you throughout if I see that you use them. The good news is that the endings for io don't change. Regardless of the conjugation, you will always recognize the io form because it always ends with o, regardless of the type of verb. Also true for the e form, for the to form, sorry. It always ends with e. And then also for the noi form. Iamo, always iamo. Okay. The ending changes for the lei, lui form of ere and ire verbs. So for ere and ire verbs, the ending is e. And this is an area of frequent errors because students, or logically, because since are verbs are the most common, the students will always want to use this ending for third person, for lei lui. But as you can see, it's different. It ends with e for ere and ire verbs. And remember, of course, the a ending, one way to remember it is by remembering that is maintaining the a of the infinitive, of the infinito. Same thing here. This maintains the a of the infinito, ate. And same thing here, ano. For voi, for ere verbs, we have ete as the ending. Well, just keep it, doesn't matter. And ite. So in this case, we have three different endings. Okay. In this case, two endings. Well, no. Two different endings. And then in the case of loro, again, we have two endings, ono and ono. Okay. So the void form with three different endings, we see that it maintains the e of the infinitive, ete for ere verbs, and it maintains the e of the infinitive for ire verbs. Okay. But for ire verbs, we have actually two types of ire verbs. We have verbs that are conjugated in this way, o, I, e, iamo, ite, ono. And then we have verbs that require the addition of isk. I call them isk verbs. So we have isco with the pronunciation change, I, she, and I'm just separating with dashes so you can see how it's formed, but obviously you wouldn't do that with when you're conjugating them, when you're working with them. Ishe, it's not there with iamo, so same iamo, and it's not there with voi. There's no isk with iamo, there's no isk with voi, ite, but it's there for loro, iscono. So this is the addition, isk verbs. There's no really way to, there's no really reason or there's no rule of why a verb is conjugated with or without the isk. You would just consult a dictionary when in doubt. A good dictionary will give you, will start a conjugation, will say preferisco, for example, for the word preferire. When conjugating, the other really important thing to remember is that you separate the ending from the root. So, for example, verb cantare, to give you an example of an adverb, prendere of an adverb, dormire for an ire verb of the first type, and preferire for an ire verb of the second type. So you remove the infinitive ending. Forgot how to cross. That's why I use a dash. You remove the infinitive ending, so the are, ere, and ire. And then you add the endings that I mentioned. So once we remove the are from cantare, we have the root cant, and so we have canto, canti, canta, cantiamo, cantate, cantano. And I'll write that out for you. Canto, canti, canta, cantiamo, cantate, cantano. And the most important thing in terms of pronunciation is to remember that the loro form has a change in the accent pattern. So it's not accented in the most common accent place for Italian, which is the penultimate syllable. Instead, it's the antepenultimate syllable. So the third from last, or the second from last, sorry. Cantano. And then, of course, same thing with ere verbs. You just take the root, prend, and then you add the endings. Prendo, oops, prendi, prendi, prende, prendiamo, prendete, and prendono. Same thing with ire verbs. Take the root, dormire. So dormo, dormi, dorme, dormiamo, dormite, and dormono. For the purposes of the text, make sure you go through all these steps just to make sure you avoid mistakes. So with preferire, we end with the root prefer, but we add the isc. So preferisco. Prefer, and we add the isc again for two. Preferi, the pronunciation changes. Preferisci. Same thing for lei, lui. Prefer, we have the isc, but the pronunciation changes. Preferisce. Not for voi though. Preferiamo. Not for noi, not for voi. Preferite. But then with loro, it's back. Preferiscono. And again, the accent pattern. Preferiscono. Dormono. Prendono. And just to remind you visually of the isc. Now, the section here deals with other verbs separately, but I prefer to go ahead and let you see the differences between are, ere, and e verbs right away. And as you can see, there are some verbs that don't follow this pattern. Sono, vado, esco, faccio, bevo, o, and vengo. Of course, we already learned essere in the previous chapter, and avere. So we know that is sono, sei, siamo, siete, sono. O, hai, a, abbiamo, avete, hanno. In this chapter, we will learn other very common verbs. Vado, esco, bevo, and vengo. So andare, uscire, fare, bere, and venire. And I believe that's all that we need to go for this this section. Nothing. One more thing. Yes, care and gare verbs. So verbs ending with care and with gare. I'm going to take the examples that are given here as so giocare and pagare. So these are other verbs. And pagare. So these verbs maintain the pronunciation of the infinitive, the ka, and the ga, the hard sound throughout. And to maintain the hard sound, you have some spelling changes. You'll remember from the pronunciation lesson in chapter 1 that in order to make where if the letter chi is followed by a, o, and u, the sound will be hard. Ka, ko, ku. But if the letter chi is followed by the vowels I and e, then the sound will be soft. Chi and che. Now, with kare verbs, the hard sound of the infinitive is maintained throughout, and you'll remember that to make the chi and the g sounds hard, With E and E, you add the letter H, the letter H. So we have giocare, gioco, giochi. To maintain the sound K, giochi, you need the letter H. Giochi, gioca, gio. Again, we need the hard sound with the end in iamo. So it would be giochiamo. If you didn't have the H, it would be giochi, as you should know, and giociamo. But these verbs maintain the pronunciation of the infinitive, the hard pronunciation, which in linguistic notation you would write as K, as the letter K. Giochiamo, giocate, and giocano. So CH with iamo and CH with E. And same thing with verbs with gare. You maintain the ga of the infinitive. So we have pago, pag. We want paghi, so we have the H. Paga, paghiamo. So we need the H to maintain the sound hard. Pagate and pagano. And again, the accent change. Important in this case because pagano means pagan. Pagano is a verb to pay. Giocano. And so this is to maintain the hard g sound. Again, in linguistics, it's written that way. And you see other examples like praticare, to practice a sport, for example. And we have also the example of the verb navigare, to navigate, whether on the sea or in the internet. And I think that's enough for this section. We have expressions of frequency here, so let's look at those quickly. We have tutti I giorni, every day, spesso, often, never, non mai. We need these two particles, and as you can see from the ellipsis, something goes in the middle, namely the verb. So non guardo mai la TV. Expressions of frequency. Let's see, page, what page is it? Page 82. So we have tutti I giorni, every day, spesso, often, non mai, never, ogni weekend, every weekend, ogni tanto, once in a while, ogni venerdì, every Friday. And of course, you can substitute the name of the day. The only two things really to remember is that the expressions spesso and non mai have a special relationship to the verb. So first and most important, non mai is non plus verbo plus mai. So the verb goes in the middle. Non guardo mai la TV. I never watch TV. And then the verb spesso, the adverb spesso often comes immediately after the verb. Guardo spesso Netflix. Okay? So spesso follows immediately the verb, and this is the normal position for adverbs, but the only one we know now is spesso. And then mai, we have non, then the verbo, then the mai. Non guardo mai la TV. The other expressions can go at the beginning or at the end of the sentence, so they're not problematic. But the most important to remember is this non verbo mai, never. Anything else to cover from this section? No, that's it. Section 3.3, I essentially went over it already. 3.3 is the present of adverbs. And adverbs. And you can see that they're grouped together, or that the chapter introduces them together because they have in common the a Louis form, the lei Louis ending e, and the loro ending ono. So I have gone really over this section already. The only thing to remind you here is make a list of ida verbs, conjugation 3a, ida verbs like dormire, and then make a list of ida verbs that require the isc, like as example preferire that I gave you. Preferire. So you need to know which verbs are conjugated like dormire and which like preferire in order to conjugate them correctly on the test. Anything else from this section? And these are the most common ones, or the ones that are introduced here. So these are the ones you need to remember. Capire. And you know capire already. If you watch any mafia movies, you know capisci, which would be capisci. Finire, finisci. So it reminds you of the English to finish. And preferire, to prefer, preferisco. Pulire, pulisco. Spedire, spedisco. One way to, as you're studying them, or as, when I introduce a new verb, I always introduce it like this. Like, for example, what is the second one? Or the first one is capire. So when I'm learning a new verb and I know that it requires the isc, then I just put in parentheses to remind myself capire, capisco. Then I know that it's capisco, capisci, capisci, and so on and so forth. More numerous than the first type, but again, there's no rule as to why some take the isc and why they don't. So you need to learn those as you learn the verbs. One important thing and one common mistake that students make is that we introduce care and gare verbs, and there's a spelling change. We have the chiaka and the giaka. And so students sometimes tend to overextend that rule and apply it to adverbs that have the G. For example, to read leggere. But these verbs don't have the spelling change, but they do have the pronunciation change. So we have leggere, soft G, but the EO form is with O, so it's going to be the hard sound, leggo. The two form is with E, so it's going to be the soft sound, leggi. The lei lui form is going to be with E, so another soft G, legge. The noi form is with iamo, so another soft G, leggiamo. Leggiamo or leggiamo, both our pronunciations are fine in this case. We remember that normally the E is not pronounced when it's followed by another vowel. Then the void form, ete, so it's going to be the soft sound, ete. And then the loro form, which ends with ono, so it's going to be the hard sound, ono. So it would be leggo, leggere is infinitive, leggere with a soft sound, but then we have the alternation, leggo, leggi, legge, leggiamo, leggete, leggono, with the accent change. So again, be careful not to over apply a rule. The changing in spelling is only for gare and care verbs. So from the first conjugation, which is why I listed them under the are column. And I really think that's it for this section. So in this case, you probably also want to make, just to remind yourselves, make a list of care verbs. And then make a list of gotta verbs. And you can also do here, as I told you, a good dictionary will show you how, if there are any things that you need to know about how to conjugate the verbs. So you would have, this is how you would find it in the dictionary: Joko, jo, hi, to remind you that there's a spelling change. And then you would see like pago, pagi. So you might want to do the same thing as you make the list of verbs with spelling changes. Okay? And I already told you what to do with isk verbs. Again, do the same thing. Capire, capisc, to remind you. Although in a dictionary, you would see it this way, or you would see capisco, which is just say capisco, etc. Because first, the eo form already has the isk. Um, I think there's anything else. As you see, I already mentioned that the most common or the largest conjugation is the are verbs. And this happens also because the majority of new verbs that enter the Italian language are are verbs. So we have the tweetare, chattare, cliccare, postare, taggare. So verbs that are coming from English, from the internet and social media. Mm. And then don't over apply this. This is also a common source of mistakes. The T and the C that we learned in asking come ti chiami, come si chiama. These are a special category of verbs, so you normally don't use the T and the C, and you won't learn the grammar behind that until much later on. So just don't remember, you don't need pronouns in Italian because the ending of the verb tells you what person it is. E, so it's obviously the to form. It would be the lay form, but we know that the lay form, and let's remind ourselves that the lay form, the lay form is also the formal. It's capitalized, although in people don't really make that distinction in writing, in everyday writing. They don't use the capital, even though it should be used. And then section 3.4, we have common irregular verbs. For irregular verbs, these are the most common: andare, bere, fare, uscire, venire. Andare. Might be better if I use a table, probably. Mm. Andare, bere, fare, uscire, venire. And venire. So these are irregular verbs, which means that the pattern is going to change. So you need to memorize them. To make your memorization job easier, you want to look for patterns, you want to look for shortcuts. For example, the void form is normally regular. So andare, andate. Bere. Bere is conjugated with the root of an archaic form based on the Latin, which would have given us something like bevere. So we will use this root. Fare is the only regular adverb, but it's actually, wait, no. Andare is irregular as well. Never mind. In the past tense is the only regular. But it's actually not an adverb. So this comes from the Latin facere, which would have given us facere. This one's actually attested. Uscire, venire. So we want to look for patterns. And as I said, the void form is commonly regular. So bevete, fate, uscite, and venite. All regular. And as you acquire verbal or language in general, but with respect to verbal forms, you're going to learn first those that you use most often. So naturally, the first two forms that you will learn, that you will acquire are so you need to learn all six forms. And here the distinction between learning and acquiring is important. So learning is when you studied something and attempt to learn it. Acquiring it is when it becomes part of your language that you can use without thinking. So naturally, you acquire those forms that are the most common, that you need, that use the most. So naturally, the first one you will acquire is the io form when speaking about yourself. So vado, bevo, faccio, esco, and why is it in both? Vengo. You will learn those first. The second one you will learn is the to form. Bevi, fai, esci, and vieni. The third form you will acquire is the and vai for andare. The third form is that you will learn is the lei, lui form when you're talking about someone else. The third most common thing that you would need. So it would be va, be, beve, fa, esce, and viene. And as you can see, even if a verb is irregular, the endings will tell you who the subject is. Vado, bevo, faccio, esco, vengo. Vai, bevi, fai, esci. Then we have va and fa for other verbs, and beve and esce for and viene for ere and ire verbs. And then the noi form, andiamo, bevete, beviamo, facciamo, usciamo, veniamo, then the loro form vanno, So you need to study and to learn all forms, but again, be cognizant of the fact that as your brain acquires, there is a temporal and predictable sequence in which you acquire forms. Like I said, io first, to second, lei third. Bevono, fanno, escono, and vengono. And like I said, you want to be looking for patterns. So we already talked about the fact that voi is almost always regular. So you don't need to worry about voi because it's going to be regular most of the time. Oops, what did I do? Oh no, what happened? Here it is. Then otherwise you look for patterns. For example, with andare, andare comes from two different verbs in Latin. It comes from um, ambulare, we believe, and vadere. So the forms that come from vadere are going to have the va. So you look for that pattern. So now okay, the va is in the io, tu, lei, and loro forms. What do they have in common? The va. To help your memorization. You're always looking for patterns to make memorizing learning easier. This one's very easy if you remember that it's conjugated with archaic form bevere, so we have bev throughout. So you would learn this one very easily. With fare and the andiamo and the voi and the noi and the voi forms are believed to come from this verb from ambulare, even though they look nothing. They don't really look like it come from that, but that's what we believe as far as historical linguistics. With fare, we see that we have the fac. So we see that in the io in the noi form. With uscire, we notice the vowel change esc. Esco, esci, esce. Careful with the pronunciation change. Esco, esci, esce. Usciamo, uscite, escono. With venire, there's not much of a pattern except for the vengo and vengono. So look for those patterns to make your job easier. Another thing, you want to look for other peculiarities to remind yourself. For example, you see that normally the loro form will have one N, but in the case of fare, we have two N's, fanno, just like we saw with are. My God, why is it not letting me? Oh, yes. So in the case of just like avere and just like avere, you have the loro form with a double N, so you'll want to pay attention to that. And what I personally do is underline to remind myself. Okay. And remind yourselves to review also, because it's assumed that you will have learned, or at least you have studied, and you should be accumulating knowledge, and you should review essere and avere. Avere. And these are like essential, some of the most essential verbs in Italian. So you will learn those first. So essere and fare being one of the most common verbs in Italian. So you will learn those first. And so in preparation for the test, pay attention to those. Other than that, a few things about these verbs. The verb uscire. Well, let's talk about fare first. Fare, as I told you, it is a super important and common verb because there's a lot of, there's dozens and dozens of expressions that use the verb fare. We call them idiomatic expressions because they're not translated literally. You already have seen some of them. When describing the weather, for example, you use fa caldo, fa freddo, fa fresco. I'll keep that in fa freddo, and fa bello, fa brutto. So it's hot, it's moderately, it's cool, it's cold, it's nice, it's an ugly day. So you will you have those idiomatic expressions with the weather that just for no reason require the verb fare. Then we have many other common expressions. Two of the most important ones are fa bello, sorry, fare colazione, faccio colazione, to eat breakfast. And then, for example, so with this one, obviously for the weather, there's not a full conjugation. We always use fa. But with fare, otherwise we have all six conjugations. Faccio, fai, fa, facciamo, fatto, fanno. So to eat breakfast, this is not to make breakfast, this is to eat breakfast. So not mangiare, but fare colazione. Another very common one is fare sport. Faccio sport, we could mean I play sports, or it could mean I exercise. Very important one. There's more here, so fare le ore piccole, to stay up until very late, and fare movimento, to like walk or do some light exercise, and fare yoga, I don't no need to explain it. Other very common ones, fare uno spuntino, to eat a snack. And one students tend to confuse the most, I think it's fare colazione. They think it's to make breakfast, but it's actually to eat breakfast. And since we're talking about food, another two common verbs that you'll want to learn right away are pranzare, pranzo. Is it introduced here? But even if it's not, you need to know it. To eat lunch. And channel, to eat dinner. Okay, so you want to learn these verbs because they are very useful for talking about your routine and so on. So notice that to say to eat, you actually don't use the verb to eat in Italian. We have fare colazione, faccio colazione, for I eat breakfast, pranzo, I eat lunch, and ceno, I eat dinner. And of course, the infinitive being fare in this case, pranzare in this case, and cenare in this case. Other common expressions with fare are fare una domanda, to ask a question, fare una foto, and we call these idiomatic because they don't really make sense if you translate them directly, and in English they wouldn't match up. So this one would be to play sports or to exercise, to ask a question. See how we have different verbs in English. And to take a picture. So here we have idiomatic expressions with fare. Okay. What else? Uscire. The literal meaning of uscire is to exit. Could also mean to leave and to go out. And obviously, in the case of going out, it's an idiomatic use. So literally to exit, but we also use to leave and to go out. Important, a common mistake that students make is if you express a destination, you must use the verb andare. To go out, you can only use, for example, company. Esco con i, con i miei amici. You really can only use the verb uscire, I go out with company, con i miei amici, con la mia famiglia, and so on. If you express the destination, you must say, you must use andare. Esco con i miei amici, andiamo in discoteca. Ok, in un locale, we go to a bar, in un locale. When you express andiamo in un locale, andiamo al cinema, so we go to the movies, for example, and so on, etc. If you express location, or sorry, not location, destination, you must use andare. So uscire only with company. Andare, if you must express a destination, it has to be andare. Okay? And that's the most important thing to know. Well, we have the verb riuscire to manage to do something, but it is conjugated just like the verb riuscire. So this is a compound form just with the prefix ri. And I think so you want to learn these common destinations, for example, al cinema, in discoteca, al bar, which is to say to the Italian bar, so coffee shop in our way of looking at it. If you want to say bar in the American sense, you would say in un locale, as I show you in the example, or in un pub, or al pub, or in un bar americano. Al cinema, in palestra, to the gym, al bar, a casa, to go home, in biblioteca, the library, and all'università, the university. One more thing about the verb uscire. So I told you that it means to go out, but it can also mean to leave. Well, these really need to go together logically, but it could also mean to leave. So for example, esco di casa. So we have uscire. di casa. So to exit, to leave, and to go out. And to go out plus company versus to go to a destination, in which case you need andare. And I think that's all for this. We have another fare expression, fare attività. No, that's not idiomatic. But fare volontariato, to volunteer, is another fare expression. So you would add that here, fare volontariato. So you want to make also a list of idiomatic expressions. Okay, such as these. And as you see, I group them by the ones that the ones that are conjugated fully, the ones that have all 6 forms of the verb, faccio colazione, fai colazione, fa colazione, and so on, versus this one where the verb is always just fa caldo, fa fresco, fa freddo, fa bello, fa brutto for the weather. And that's it for chapter 3. Again, don't forget about this very important resource, the vocabulary list, and especially the recording
Domande ed espressioni.
to help you with your pronunciation. Okay. Okay, di pomeriggio, they updated it. So you can say del pomeriggio, di pomeriggio, there's no difference, but since it's easier to just say di all the way across, keep it with di mattina, di pomeriggio, di sera, di notte. When you have cases like that, where there's 2 options that are equivalent, pick one and stick to it to make your life easier. So that's why I think they eliminated the option to use del. So again, make sure you are familiar with the meaning of these verbs and conjugate them. I told you before that the best way to study for the test, especially when you're studying conjugation, so this is the first chapter where we are doing that, although we had 2 verbs in the last one, but this is where the concept of conjugation is introduced. If I were you, I would go through this list and group all the verbs by are, ere, and ire, then write out the conjugations fully. Write out the conjugations fully, maybe even do that multiple times until you feel comfortable. And that's it. Any questions before I go over the format of the test? Let's see. Let me grab, how can I show you without pausing? Okay, I'll pull up my iPad. If you give me just a second to pull up the test. So the tests are in format quite similar. They're structured according to the structure of the book, which means you'll have always the strategie de comunicazione first. So the common expressions. With those, I've gotten a few messages where students tell me, well, like, what's the grammar of this expression? Those are introduced kind of like vocabulary terms, really. So they are the grammar behind them, which can sometimes be very complicated. For example, to say I like, the mi piace, that's a very grammatically complicated structure. So you just learn it as kind of like as a vocabulary term, and you don't worry about all the grammar behind it. And actually, before I finish, a student was asking me about some answers which they did not understand. So why is this not voi, not loro? Why is this loro, not voi? So we have Adele and Barbara. When we have two persons' names, you're going to know that it's loro. Name, person's name, plus person's name. So two or more names, then that's going to equal loro. When you have person's name ed io, so another person and I, and again it could be two or more names plus io ed io. Then that's going to be equal to voi. It should be in the bottom. And when, sorry, that's wrong.
Why isn't it noi?
You're right. So this one should be noi. Dio is noi. And then if you have two e plus multiple people's names, to a person's name, or two a plus two or more names, then that's going to be voi. Is that clear? So when you have a person's name ed io, for example, Laura ed io, that's going to equal noi. So then we use the noi form of the verb. Laura ed io andiamo al cinema. Ed io equals noi. When we have two and another person's name, to a Laura, that's going to equal voi. So that's going to be to a Laura, andate al cinema. And then when you have two or more someone else's name, sorry, when you have two people's names or more, Laura e Beatrice. Let's add the e here to make it clear for us. So person's name Laura e Beatrice. And that's going to equal loro. Laura e Beatrice vanno al cinema. Is that clear? Or it could be a plural thing. Plural, a group of people. And that's also going to equal loro. Okay, so plural, for example, gli studenti, sorry, gli studenti, and that's plural, so equal loro. Gli studenti studiano in biblioteca. So we have person's name, Edio, but it could be two or more names. The Edio is the key part. That's going to equal noi, and therefore the verb is going to be the noi form. Laura Edio, andiamo al cinema. If we have two e plus a person's name or two or more names, then you'd have the voi form. Tu e Laura, and therefore the voi form of the verb, andate al cinema. If you have a person's name, then the conjunction e, and then another person's name, or you can have more than two names, then that's going to equal loro, and therefore you're going to have the loro form, vanno al cinema. And then, of course, if you have a plural, which is not typically a group of people expressed through a plural noun, then you'd have, that's going to equal also the loro, and then you have also the loro form. Gli studenti studiano in biblioteca. And that answers this one. So, I signori Bambrilla. So I think this person was thinking Bambrilla is singular, but that's a last name. So the noun, the subject is I signore Bambrilla, the Bambrillas, the Bambrilla family. So it's a plural noun. I signori Bambrilla fanno. So that answers that. Here we have a name, e, and a name. So that's going to be loro. La Adele e Barbara prendono l'autobus. Then we have to discuss just this one. This one, bisogna, it's necessary. It's like mi piace. So what we studied in 3.1. We saw ti piace plus infinitive, ti va di, mi, ti, le, mi, ti, informal, le, formal. No, let me change the order to make it clearer. So mi for io, ti, mi piace, ti le piace, le feminine, gli masculine piace, plus the infinitive, plus the infinito. We also saw, and then the examples being these two, we have the ti va di, is also plus infinito. And then we have, this is the one, let's see, oh, we already put this here. Okay, and then we have this one, which is bisogna. It's not conjugated, it's an impersonal. Not conjugated. So there's no bisogno, bisogni, bisogna. But just stays bisogna. Impersonal and therefore invariable. Same thing here, invariable. And then when we have with infinitive, it's also invariable, just piace. Any questions about that? So bisogna studiare.
Yes, if you want to say I need help, Or do you not say that?
Yes, you can say that. So I'll go, give me a sec. Bisogna studiare per l'esame. So that would be, it's necessary, so on. And in chapter 2, we learned the expression, the idiomatic expression, avere bisogno. Is that right? Bisogno. I don't know why it looks funny. Bisogno di plus
So ho bisogno, no, ho bisogno di. I mean,
yes.
okay.
Or it could also be with noun or plus noun. So that would be ho bisogno di studiare per l'esame. So that's I need. Why is he putting it in a different? Maybe it's the size. Ho bisogno di studiare. I need to study. Okay, so the avere bisogno di idiomatic expression for I need. Bisogna impersonal, invariable. Avere bisogno, obviously you can have all 6 forms of avere. Ho bisogno di studiare, hai bisogno di studiare, ha bisogno di studiare, and so on. Okay? Anything else? Thank you for your patience. I know it's a lot to cover, and I'm sure your head's about to explode on a Friday evening. Oh, we have one last thing. So we covered that bisogna. And the next thing is this person's wondering, why is this the loro, the void form, not the loro? Correctly seeing that this is a plural noun, the person thought it should be loro. But here, this tiny little punctuation mark makes all the difference. The punctuation mark, the comma here tells you that you're not talking about the ragazzi, you're talking to the ragazzi. And at any rate, if you were talking about I ragazzi, let me put that here to make that distinction clear. I ragazzi studiano in biblioteca, not to be confused with plural, well, person's name. No, sorry. Here. Two. No, it wouldn't be the two. It would just be plural noun, or no, it could be person's name. Could also be multiple names. And this is the important part. The comma. This punctuation mark tells you that you are talking to them, addressing them. So therefore, this is voi. Or as in this example, it's ragazzi. It could be an affirmative. Ragazzi. So it could be a plural noun, group of people. And of course, the crucial thing is to notice the punctuation, the comma. then of course, both of those equal voi. Is that clear? So again, person's name è io, that's noi. Tu è person's name, that's voi. Person's name and person's name, person's name, comma, that's also voi because you're talking to them. And or it could be a plural noun referring to a group of people, comma. Again, it means you're addressing them. So that would also equal voi. Then person's name, and person's name, that's going to be, again, loro. Why is this? And then plural noun, I ragazzi, that's going to be loro. To separate this by any space to make it easier to read. Okay. And that resolves that. Any questions before I move on to the format of the test? Let's go ahead and then go to the format of the test. I don't know if anyone's still here. I'm sorry, this has gone quite longer than I anticipated. Thanks in part to the vicissitudes of technology. So the first section is, as always, Strategie di comunicazione. It's going to be a multiple choice where you are matching the expression. Sorry, that's the wrong test. Chapter 3, Capitolo 3. First section is always Strategie di comunicazione. You'll have a matching where you have a question and you choose the most logical answer from a drop-down menu. Then the second section, you have a dialogue and you complete it with appropriate, and you have a word bank and you complete it choosing the logical word from a drop-down menu. Pretty straightforward. The third section is based on Strutture 3.1, so the infinitive. So piace plus infinitive. It's a listening activity where you hear a description of a person, and based on that description, you're going to say what she or he likes to do. So for example, well, no, I won't give you an example. Make it way too easy. Well, I will give you an example. For example, you might hear Marco gioca a calcio e a basket. So Marco plays soccer and basket. What does he like to do, or what does he gli piace praticare lo sport? He likes to play sports. So based on the description, I say what she or he liked to do. So it's listen to the description, complete it with a logical infinitive. This is, of course, mi piace and so on plus infinitive. The next section, you have very similar. So again, based on 3.1, and you have fill in the blank where what's missing is the verb. So what do I like to do? You fill it in with a logical verb based on the location. So at the al bar, what would you like to do? Of course, drink a coffee or something like that. Strutture 3.2. So the present tense of other verbs, you have sentences, you have a verb bank, and you have to complete the sentences with the logical verb in the correct form. So analyze those subjects and remember these rules that or these structures that we went to. Blank ed io, tu e blank, blank e blank, so on and so forward. Plural noun plus blank. A second section on that same grammar point, so 3.2, present tense of other verbs. Again, you have a verb bank and then you have sentences. Complete the sentences with the logical verb in the correct form. Seventh section, it's based on these idiomatic expressions. So fare colazione, fare sport, so on and so forth. I forgot one important one. Faccio una passeggiata, to go for a walk. Passeggiata with two G's. So you have two sections on that? No. Then you have the last section is based on this same grammar point, except that it's talking about you. What do you do? What do you not do? Okay. And I think that's about it. Yes, that's it. Any last questions before we go? Someone ask, how can I say I need help? And very good question. Where is the bisogno? So
Yeah, I think you answered that one. Yeah.
so
Ho bisogno di aiuto.
so that yes, ho bisogno di aiuto. And aiuto here is not the verb aiutare, it's a noun.
Mhm.
So I need help. It's not a verb, it's a noun, okay? So it's not aiuto, aiuti, aiuti. It's going to be ho bisogno di aiuto, hai bisogno di aiuto, ha bisogno di aiuto, and so on. Anything else? I know we went over a lot of stuff, so I'm sorry. Hopefully your head's not exploding and you're still awake. If you have any other questions, I will try to be on top of my email, or even better, since it's the weekend, use the group chat. That's the easiest and most likely way you can be in touch with me, even if it's the weekend. I will see that and I'll reply right away, regardless of where I am. I apologize that we couldn't do this session sooner, but I had some trainings to do in preparation for Mason in Rome. So my time this week was very limited. Thank you for coming on a Friday evening. And yes, you have tomorrow and Sunday to study before doing your test, which is due on Sunday at 11:59. Okay? Thanks again, and see you in a couple of weeks for Capitolo 4. Buona serata, buon weekend. Ciao.